Hello and welcome. If you're new to my channel, I'm Cosmic Spectrum, a freelance illustrator and character designer, and this is where I share my art process. So in this video, I'll be sharing a recent sketchbook session featuring a character of mine called Alma, and I will be showing you the whole process from scratch, and it is a longer video, so let's settle in for a chill sketchbook session together. And just before I get started, I just wanted to shout out today's sponsor. This video sponsor is something very different from the usual. It's a mobile game and it's very fun. So this game is called Tears of Themis and it's developed by Hoyoverse, same developer as Genshin Impact if you've heard of that game. So it has very high quality art and I was actually super impressed by the graphics and quality of illustrations. Then there are so many illustrations, it's crazy. I don't typically play mobile games and I've actually never played an otome or dating sim type of game before, but it's actually a lot more fun than I expected. So let me tell you about the game. It's a romance with wits, detective style otome game. Here's the gist of the story. You're a junior attorney at a prestigious law firm in a modern high-tech city called Stellus. The city is being plagued by an increasing number of unusual crimes, and it's up to you to solve the cases and uncover what's really going on. When I first started playing the game, I felt a bit overwhelmed with all the different features, but it's actually pretty easy and straightforward to pick up, and there are a ton of mini games that are basically nested within the overarching story. The story is episodic and it has a bigger overarching plot, and in each episode you have interactions with NPCs where you either have to have conversations with them or question them about the case, or you can also examine 3D crime scenes, which is super fun, to look for clues and collect evidence, which you later have to piece together to go to court and win the case. The most fun part is that while solving cases, you get to interact with 4 unique male protagonists / companions that help you piece together the clues and have an immersive relationship building experience where you can visit them and learn their backstory alongside the episodic main story. So it's like a little separate feature. There's also a card collection component that features a ton of unique illustrations of the 4 male protagonists, which feed into the battle card minigame that is recurrent within the episodic structure. It kind of helps you move forward throughout each episode and is also a lot of fun. So right now, Tears of Themis is celebrating its 1-year anniversary by hosting an event called Blissful Fete. You can walk around the city of Stellus and interact with characters, play a bunch of new minigames, and complete little quests to earn extra rewards. The most exciting part of the event is the new SSR cards released on July 11th, and you get a maximum of 92 card draws if you participate in this event. I honestly love this game. I didn't expect to get so involved in it. It really is super immersive and the artwork is really nice to look at. I just want to know what happens next. You can download Tears of Themis through my link in the description, and it's free to play and super fun. I highly recommend that you try it out if you want to relax and unwind. And if you're interested in the game, there's various social media that you can follow to keep up to date with the news and events. So I'll put the links in my description as well. And now back to the video. So for this sketchbook session, I didn't really know what I was gonna do right off the bat, so I just sat down and came up with a quick idea, if you can call it that, on the spot, which is basically just draw one of my characters in some sort of fun outfit. And I got some inspiration for this outfit for a pin that I saved a while back on my Pinterest, in which it was just like a combination or like a collage of clothing that had this really cool looking Ouija board shirt that I really wanted to draw, so I did that, and then I pretty much just made up the skirt and the rest of the outfit. But yeah, I am here with a sketchbook session finally. I know the last couple of videos I uploaded were different, but I wanted to get back to the sketchbook. And actually, unlike my previous sketchbook session videos, this one is in a different sketchbook. And I wanted to quickly tell you guys about that because I love this sketchbook so much. I haven't really used it much before, but I initially started to use it a few weeks ago for my gouache studies, and the paper is very different from the other sketchbook that I've been using up until now. And this is a mixed media journal 500 series of Strathmore brand. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's a pretty reputable art material brand. Anyways, so this specific sketchbook, the 500 series mixed media paper, is really, really nice. The paper is very thick, so it can handle pretty much any media without really buckling that much from what I've noticed. And it's somewhat textured, but not too textured, so it's kind of similar to watercolor paper, but has its own type of subtle texture, I would say. And I actually got recommended this sketchbook by my friend, Sir Pangur Nina. I don't know if you guys have heard of her, but she's an amazing artist, and her handle on Instagram is Sir Pangur. I will put it up on the display here. And yeah, I love the sketchbook so much. Like I said, I haven't really used it before, and I decided to use it for my gouache studies because it's just been sitting there kind of empty. And I'm really glad I did, because I love this paper, and I think it's probably my favorite sketchbook paper so far for this kind of stuff. And since it's mixed media, I wanted to try something slightly new for this sketchbook spread, which ended up being a combination of just like a regular pencil sketch, after which I inked the sketch with micron liners and used watercolor for the coloring, which is also something new. I haven't really done that before. I actually don't think I've ever really done that. Mostly in the past, I have used microns with markers pretty much exclusively. If I ever used watercolor before, I typically used it with regular ink using a G-nib. So for this time was the first somehow of me using these two materials together. But yeah, that's the gist of the materials that I used for this sketchbook spread. And I actually just wanted to mention real quick that tomorrow is finally the campaign start for my new art book, Prism, which I have told you guys about before. It's with 3D Total Publishing, and I'm so excited about this campaign because I have so many art books from 3D Total, and they're pretty much my favorite art books because they're so well crafted. And yeah, it's been a really long time. I've been working on this book for about a year now, and I can't believe the campaign is finally starting tomorrow. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. But tomorrow I will be posting the actual video that we made together for the campaign, and I'm super excited to share that with you guys because I don't know, I think the video turned out pretty great. I've never really seen my art be edited like that before, and yeah, it was pretty cool to see it all come together at long last. So I will include a link for that in my description. But yeah, back to the process. So I picked the character kind of arbitrarily for this spread. It was Alma, like I mentioned. She's kind of one of my newer characters, and for whatever reason, I just keep gravitating towards wanting to draw her lately. And I typically try to capture the character's personality in some way when I draw quick sketches like this. And for this one in particular, I wanted to capture the fact that she's a little bit timid, so hopefully that came across. I kind of try to do that with the poses that she takes, with her hands kind of covering her midsection. I know that that's a pretty common way of carrying yourself for girls that are a little bit shy and not too socially open and receptive to conversation. Just something that I know from personal experience and just by, observing my surroundings. But yeah, I think that kind of showed her personality a little bit. And yeah, another thing I actually wanted to say was that, as you can probably tell, this video is kind of not very scripted at all. I have some bullet points that I wanted to mention, but overall I'm just kind of freestyling it, and that's because I have so many things going on right now that I'm just completely chaotic, and I did not have time to properly plan out what I was going to talk about. And on that note, I also realized that I do not actually have to talk through the entirety of every single video. I watch a bunch of other art channels on YouTube, and a lot of them have quite a few pauses with just music intermission, and I think for this video, this is also something that I'm going to do. and I will just come back here and there to comment something or other on the process, but I think overall it's relatively straightforward. And in the interest of having it be a more of a relaxing type of sketchbook session, I will edit in some music intermissions. Something that came to mind that I remembered while I was watching this footage is that I started off the sketch with my H pencil, or I think it was 3H or something like that, or maybe F, one of those really hard pencils that I tend to use. But then shortly into the process, I decided to switch into my regular HB mechanical pencil, which is actually something I haven't used in a long time. I used to sketch with a mechanical pencil in my sketchbooks all the time, but that was typically for sketches that I never really elaborated on and that just stayed rough. But for this sketchbook, I found that the really hard pencil that I typically use barely showed up on this paper, and so I decided that it would probably be easier to just use an HB pencil. And I think for the most part, it was a good decision. However, it is quite a bit darker than what I'm used to, and so inking this afterwards was a little more challenging than usual, and I did have to kind of bring in an eraser, but I didn't want to smudge it around too much, so I pretty much just did my best with the sketch that I had, which is a little bit messy by my standards, I will say, but you know, that's kind of what I felt like at the time. But now that I look back on it, I guess it's not as messy as it could have been. So something that I've been meaning to mention to you guys that I haven't gotten around to up until now, and I don't know like if it's a good time to announce anything at all, but I have been steadily working towards a situation in which I can finally start working on my comic. I know that I've kind of said something like that before, but this does feel very different and way more definitive to me, because essentially I have spent the last couple of years on basically just saving money in order to afford to be able to take a few months off, or at least a few months away from working on freelance and stuff like that, to allow me for the time that I need to just figure out the story to a point where I can finally start executing the comic. And I have actually done quite a bit of work within the last several years on it, and especially the last couple of years I've made a ton of progress on the script, and I have the first 3 chapters already written. And so my general plan is to write a couple more chapters and then to point form, like bullet form, a few more chapters, so that I roughly have like the first volume planned out or something like that, so that I can feel confident in the sequence of events, so that I can like finally just start executing the first chapter, because I'm relatively sure about it now, but I just want to get a little bit further into the story so that I can be 100% sure that nothing else absolutely needs to come up within the first chapter, because I don't know, I'm just taking it a lot more seriously this time around. So because as some of you may know, a lot of you probably don't know, but this is this comic that I'm writing is a rewrite. It's a restart of a story that I've already attempted to do once, and it's changed so much that it might as well be a different story at this point, but it does have the same characters. But yeah, I figured I'd just mention that because I'm so close now that the art book that I've been working on for such a long time with 3D Total Publishing is finally coming to a wrap up with this Kickstarter campaign, which I really, really hope is successful, because that's kind of what I was also hoping for in order to allow me to work on my comic without worrying too much about my income for at least a little while. But yeah, I'm super happy to say that I'm just wrapping up everything this week. This week's been super hectic for me. Actually, the last few weeks, maybe like the last month or something. Things have just been crazy in terms of my workload. But I'm very, very close to be able to finally just dedicate more of my time to working on Gloaming Veil. I actually think about it every single day and come up with something new. So I'm super excited to be able to just actually sit down and work on the script. Getting back to the process of the sketchbook page, I just wanted to mention that what you see here is me using this Micron, trying to be quick and loose is what I had in my mind. But as you can see, obviously, it's still pretty controlled and slow looking back. And honestly, like, looking back at the result or seeing the result after erasing all the pencil away, I realized that it's very difficult for me to make things quick and loose. I don't really know even how to do that, honestly, because this was me trying really hard to make the super, like, oh, I don't care, it's just a sketch, whatever, I'm gonna ink it super quickly and it'll be messy. Yeah, no, it looks basically very similar to the other inks that I have. Maybe slightly less precise, but honestly the difference is not even discernible as far as I can tell, which I thought was kind of funny looking back on it, because yeah, I was trying to be quick and messy. But yeah, I don't think overall it's a bad thing at all. I think I did actually ink it a little bit faster than I normally would, because I tried not to linger too much and worry about getting all the details and getting all the line intersections correctly. But I mean, you know, at least I think I managed to save some time, which is good. But I think going forward, maybe I should try to adapt this ink it super quickly attitude more often, because it does save some time. And if the result is not that different, then what's the point of trying to be neat, I guess. Just thought that was kind of hilarious for me personally, looking back on my attempts to be neat, or sorry, the opposite, loose and quick. So yeah, now as you can see that I'm using the kneadable eraser to take out the graphite underneath, it is pretty clean, so I guess that's good. I think I spent the last several months focusing more or less exclusively on traditional art, which I think I'm finally reaching a point where I really miss drawing digitally, and I think I might switch back to that for some time as soon as I start working on developing my comic series again. And I don't know, I usually like to design characters using digital media. Like, I typically use Photoshop, that's my go-to. drawing app or program. And yeah, since the next task that I have to do is to design all the missing characters from the first chapter, which is actually quite a bit, because it just so happens that the first chapter of Gloaming Veil actually has a ton of characters show up within the first few pages and then throughout the first chapter. So I am gonna have to do all the missing designs before I start. That's typically how, or at least that's how I've approached doing comics in the past. And so that's going to take a little bit of time, but it is really exciting because I always have so much fun designing new characters. And last time I did it was the time that I designed the character that I'm drawing in the sketchbook spread. And it was so much fun. Ever since I did that batch of new characters, I've kind of been obsessed with this one, Alma, and her cousin Astrid. I guess those two were just my favorite from that particular batch. And yeah, I've drawn them a bunch of times, which is really fun. I'm, yeah, like I said, super excited for what's new. The only thing that I'm slightly concerned about is that a lot of the characters that I have to design for the first chapter are actually like middle-aged people / older people or elderly people, and that is something that I'm not particularly comfortable with. It's like it's just super out of my comfort zone. I never draw older people. For some reason, I've always just stuck to drawing younger characters. I think that's, I don't know, it's probably pretty common. I don't see a whole lot of artists that I'm friends with drawing older people regularly either. But yeah, it's definitely something I want to get better at, and you know, I guess just having to design them is going to be my opportunity to up that skill a little bit. It's gonna be tough, but I'm just gonna have to find some references and see what I can pick up from other artists' styles to help me out on that one. Alright, so as you can see at this point in the sketchbook session, I have finally moved on to watercolors, and I've kind of decided to do that right off the bat. When I was starting this sketchbook session, I didn't really know what I was going to draw, but I did know that I wanted to use some watercolors because overall, I would say it's probably my favorite quick and painless medium to use, because pretty much all the colors are in this one palette and it's pretty easy to mix them. Like, mixing watercolors is a lot easier, I find, for me than mixing gouache, because gouache, like, you know, I'm talking about the artist gouache, it dries a different color, especially with the lighter colors, so it's a bit difficult, and also with the layering, and it just needs a lot more planning, whereas watercolor is transparent, so it's a lot more straightforward. It is pretty similar to using alcohol markers, but I think it's actually a lot easier because it's easier to control the pigment with a brush, because the brush is a lot more precise than a alcohol marker tip. And obviously with watercolors, there's just an infinite choice of colors, so I don't ever have to feel constricted. Sometimes I know that I've mentioned before that I do like color constrictions, and that is still true, but I think I've actually gotten to a point where I've done so much freelance work where I have to use way more colors than I typically do, and I think as a result I've just slowly gotten more and more used to working with a colorful type of palette rather than something super simple and muted like my typical palettes. And so I guess at least I find the idea of using a lot of colors less intimidating now than I used to. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to use watercolors for this one, is because I didn't want to bother trying to look through all my markers to find the perfect skin tone or like the perfect hair color or whatever for my character, and I figured it would be way easier to just mix anything I need as I go with watercolors. And plus, I really like the textures that you can create with watercolors so easily. It adds so much interest to the piece with very little work. And I mean, I guess a good example of that is coming up when I just use black for the top, and it's got so much interesting texture in it, even though it's just one color with water. I feel like that's one of the best parts about using ink or like watercolor. They behave very similar in that respect. It's very nice to look at, in my opinion. So here, after I colored in her skin tone, I noticed that something was missing, and I realized that it was her heavy dark makeup, so I put that in. It's always like a really fun part of the process to put in the character's specific makeup. I guess I draw a lot of girls, so it's something I do very frequently. Something I wanted to mention was that when I was drawing this, I think I had an especially low confidence day or something, or I just wasn't feeling it the whole time up until like the very last maybe 20 minutes of the process, where I finally put in the design into the t-shirt. I thought that this page was a failure, and I actually wasn't even sure if the footage would be usable. I wasn't sure if it's something that I would even want to share, which is really funny looking back, because I actually really like how this page turned out in the end. Like, it's weird to say that I was super unsure about it up until like the last parts of the process, which is kind of funny because, you know, I'm looking at the footage now and it doesn't look bad to me, so I don't know what was going on, but I thought it would be good to mention that because, like I said, I am happy with the end result, and I don't understand why I thought it was so bad in the middle of the process looking back on the footage. So clearly something was just off with me that day and the way that I perceived things. So, you know, maybe art block has something to do with that as well. It's like if you're just not feeling it, what you see could just be interpreted by your brain in a negative light, and then if you just let it sit for a couple of days, it suddenly looks better. I feel like that does happen to me pretty often with my art, actually. Something looks a lot worse while I'm working on it, and then later on when I look back on it, I'm like, man, it wasn't that bad. Like, it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought that it looked while I was doing it. But then again, sometimes there's the opposite where I think something is good and then I look at it the next day and it just looks so much worse, and then I have to go back in and fix a bunch of stuff. That happens a lot too, so yeah. When I was working on the skirt, I wasn't too sure whether I should do the black first and leave out a silhouette, or if I should do the little designs of the flowers first and then paint in the black. As you can see, I obviously did that, and I did that specifically because watercolor kind of lifts, and I only used watercolor here. I did not use any colored ink, and so it was the better choice to paint in the flower first, because if I painted the black silhouetted out first, which is something I actually do all the time with ink, if I painted on top of that later, it would have made the black bleed over into the flowers. So thankfully I had the clarity of mind to make that choice. I could have easily made that mistake because I'm not very used to only using watercolors. So yeah, crisis averted, I guess. I feel like if I did that and the pattern of the skirt got ruined, I would have probably not posted this and just quit it or something. I think that making little sketchbook spreads like this featuring one character helps me feel like I am getting to know the character when I'm in the process of making the drawing. I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense, but I think my mind is basically preoccupied the entire time while I'm working on the art by thinking about the character and just you know, whatever comes to mind. For me, it's typically like just trying to imagine the character in their natural habitat, or like what their daily life looks like, what influences some of their decisions, etc. So it's kind of something that I was thinking about on and off while I was making this drawing, and as a result, I do feel like I have a much better idea of this character. I don't think there's like a ton that I can say at the moment, and I will mention that she's actually not a particularly major character so far. She's one of the background characters that kind of appear, I guess, often enough, but so far her character arc is kind of unknown. Like, I have a rough idea of where I might take it if I decide to introduce like more minor character arcs, because I already have 4, or actually 5, 6 very major characters. Okay, for the sake of like clarity, I think it is 4, with one kind of main character on top of like, you know, that supersedes everybody else. Like, if I had to pick one main character, I could do it, but overall I like to think of it as it being kind of equal between 4, and then there is a 5th character that's also important, and then a little bit later on there's a 6th that's just as important, arguably. So yeah, that sounds kind of complicated, but I guess maybe I've mentioned before, but the way that I look at it is kind of more like a series, like a long-running show where the story focus is the story and the plot is not very straightforward, and there's an overarching bigger plot that emerges a little bit later on, and that's why the focus kind of shifts here and there as certain characters become more relevant and more, I don't know, involved, I guess, in the plot as certain things get revealed. So yeah, hopefully that made sense. Yeah, but I am extremely excited to start working on the comic again, because it is something that occupies my mind like all the time, and I feel like everything I do is just perceived by me as steps that I have to take towards being able to work on my comic. Yeah. So right about now is the part where I finally took out the white jelly roll gel pen and put in the detail in the clothing that I was excited about since the very beginning of this drawing, and I think that finally like really pulled it together for me, and I decided that I was happy with the result, and I was actually excited to share it with you guys. And up until then I was not entirely sure, but I do think adding little things like patterns, like the pattern on the skirt and the pattern on the shirt, it adds so much to the drawing for me personally. Maybe I'm just like super detail oriented, but I think that really kind of pulled it together and took it to a level that I was very happy with. Not 100% sure about my decision to add the orange outline, to be honest, because it kind of clashed with the hair a little bit, I think, but overall, I don't know. I don't think it ruined it, so it's fine. Maybe next time I would have used like a lighter orange, so it would be more contrasting with the hair, but anyways, that's just a retrospective observation. So now that we're near the end of this video, I just wanted to thank you guys for continuing to watch my videos and reiterate again how excited I am to work on my comic, which will happen this year for sure. And yeah, just one last mention about my art book that's going to launch tomorrow at 12 p.m. July 14th, in case you're watching this video later. And yeah, thanks so much for watching, you guys. I will see you in the next one. Bye!